So in my last video, I talked about why I think vibe coding actually sucks, but I do want to kind of give you another honest perspective. I think sometimes the content I post is a little bit more clickbaity. I know it's going to get views. This one, I just want to give you my honest opinion on AI because honestly, I feel like I'm the original vibe coder. If you go back 6 months ago, I coded an application only using voice to text. Okay, here's the video right here, and I also did a live stream on it. So using AI exclusively without like diving through the code and having to actually touch code itself, I've been doing for a while. And I've been using Copilot like since it came out off and on. I've been using Cursor to help build out various other projects. I'm not sure where I actually officially switched to Cursor on my my videos. It's probably like 6 months ago. But I do believe I was using different AI tools along the way like Claude and ChatGPT and stuff. With that being said, I've been using AI for a while and I've been in the industry coding for 11 plus years now. So I want to give you my perspective on when I like to use AI, when I just ignore AI and I go straight to coding. And also, should you be learning AI as a junior? When should you like leverage it more? When should you not? And honestly, I probably just ramble about things. So I think the best way to exemplify AI is let's talk about real things that I've tried building using AI. So recently this morning, I wanted to refactor my homepage for my course platform that I'm trying to build out. And I wanted to make the homepage a little bit more interesting. So I added a library called three.js, which builds out 3D nodes and it puts them around a 3D space around this sun, basically. Now, I used AI exclusively for this, right? I went to Cursor and I basically kept asking it to, build out this 3D system. I probably went through like 10 or 15 iterations of prompting, but finally I got to something that I want. Overall, I think it took me maybe like 30 minutes to an hour to get it working with AI. It did run into a bunch of bugs along the way. I have to basically help tweak it a little bit. So the real question is why did I use AI to build this out versus just doing it myself? And there's a variety of reasons, right? The first one is this is just throwaway code. This isn't a core thing in my code base that I truly need to understand. This is like a marketing thing where I'm like, let's just get a 3D thing going. So it just looks cool when someone lands on this page. And from a marketing standpoint, maybe that'll drive up engagement or drive up sales. Secondly, this is not important to my overall career path. I would consider myself more of a web developer, full stack developer, or a DevOps engineer. Building out 3D scenes is not something that's going to really elevate my current niche in my professional career. With that being said, this is like a prototype. I could throw it away and not care. And it's also not core knowledge to my career. Now, the third thing I want to mention is that this is something I could build myself, right? I just want to give you some context. Back in college, I took a 3D course for a semester. We had to learn about 3D scenes. We had to learn about 3D objects. We learned about vertex shaders, fragment shaders. We learned about camera perspective transforms, the linear algebra. Like they went in detail of using 3D. And I think we also did it in a browser as well. So we kind of like learned about WebGL. That knowledge that I learned, although it was 10 or 11 years ago, it's still somewhere up there, right? And that was just one course in college. I do believe that I had to take like Physics 3 in college or Physics 2, where they teach you how to take like magnetic fluxes over 3D objects. So you do have to understand like mathematical formulas that use like cosine and sine and tangent and how you can use them in equations to calculate magnetic fields or flux around objects. And then on top of that, I've always been into gaming and 3D stuff. So like I've always played around with Unity a little bit on the side. I played around with these, three.js libraries on the side. I played around with other 3D libraries. And so 3D is not something that's completely foreign to me. And so looking at this, could I build this myself? I think I could. The real question is how long would it take me? And how important is it for me to learn it? Again, like I said, me knowing how to build this by hand, I don't think it's valuable. Now, if I were to switch careers and become a game engineer designer, then yes, I should be able to build this by hand and I should be able to do it pretty fast. It's probably not too hard. You probably just have to spawn some random things around a 3D space. And then you just have to kind of draw lines between these different nodes randomly. And if you look at the code, it's not too long. It's like 500 lines of code. And I'm sure someone who works in 3D space could easily build this out themselves. But using AI allowed me to build this out much faster than I could have done myself. At some point in your career, you have to admit that using a third-party library or using AI to just get the job done is probably a much better investment in your time. Honestly, I don't know what my original talking point is, but let's just keep on winging it and see if we can talk about some more stuff. So if you're a beginner, I think there's a lot of confusion around like, should I be using AI when I'm learning and when should I not use it? And going back to the story I just gave, I think if you understand how to build something yourself, or you feel confident that you could build it yourself, and you know it's just going to take you a lot of time to go back and refresh those things. Could I have gone back and refreshed my memory about all the things I learned 10 years ago about 3D spaces and, try to really dive into Three.js and learn it? Absolutely. Do I want to spend 16 hours doing that? Not really, right? I don't have much time. I want to focus on my YouTube channel. I want to focus on just shipping this little feature. And I don't want to actually improve my knowledge in 3D space just yet. Maybe in the future I will, but right now I don't care. That is the mentality I would recommend you as a junior. If there's something that you're doing and you don't think it's very important to the overall goal of learning, then maybe you could just use AI to do it. For example, let's say you want to build out a website, but you're like a backend engineer. You don't care about the UI. Then yeah, use AI to generate your landing page. And people argue that that's a bad take. But I mean, honestly, if you're trying to build out a landing page, typically you go and you find pre-existing components, right? And you just copy and paste them into your application anyway, and you don't go and you ever learn about okay, how does this drop down actually work under the hood? How does this type ahead actually work under the hood? Because you don't care. You just want to build a working application, and you care more about the back end engineering type of thing. So you want to focus on using AI less on the things that you're truly passionate about, or the things you truly care about, because you need to have a core fundamental understanding of how they all work. Now, in a perfect world, if you have infinite time, then you should probably be learning everything and just understand how all this stuff works and how it all fits together and how you can do it yourself. But realistically, there's only so many hours in a day. And once you get a job, you're asked to ship features and deliver value, right? And so there's a trade-off of how much time do I spend actually learning it and understanding it versus how much time do I just get it done. Now, on that point, if you're on a team and you have a bunch of engineers that are working with you, it's probably a good idea to understand how it all works, because what's going to happen is you're going to ship a feature and then someone's going to come back and ask you, okay, there's a little bug with it. How did you implement this? How does this work? And I don't think sitting in a meeting in front of 8 other people saying, I don't know, I used AI to generate it, I don't think that's going to really reflect good on your character and who you are. I think managers are going to be kind of scratching their head of okay, does this guy actually know how to code? So in a professional setting, I think there's more weight into understanding the code that's being shipped, because a lot of the times, if you look at this code here, it just fills the code with magic numbers. It's not very configurable. If you look at the calculations here of the tilt angle and all this orbit speed, it just hard-coded random numbers everywhere, which is very unmaintainable. This is a very bad way to code. You should not have magic numbers sprinkled all throughout your code base. You should at least have a centralized place for configuration. Now, granted, I could ask AI to refactor and remove all magic numbers and just make it a little bit cleaner. But you probably won't know to ask AI that until you gain more experience. So some more things I would recommend with AI is get good at asking it things such as can you refactor this code to make it cleaner? Can you make it more modular? Can you make it more abstract? Can you make it more decoupled? Can you make it more secure? I think just asking it to do things over your code base along the way is a very good approach. And if you're a beginner, I think you should ask those questions and then review the diffs, right? If you're using AI and if you're a junior or trying to learn, review the diffs, because again, you don't want to get caught up in a meeting and they're asking you, what is this line doing? How does this actually work? And you're like, dude, I don't know. I don't actually work. I just, let AI do my job. I just think it's going to look pretty bad. Now let's talk about the quality of AI, because a lot of people say AI is garbage. It generates slop. And from my perspective, that's true. It can generate a lot of slop, and you have to have a proactive approach to accepting the things that it generates, which is why I'm kind of against vibe coding. Although vibe coding is great if you just want to build out something standard. One thing I think AI is really great for, if you're doing web development, it's almost like these models have been specifically trained on JavaScript and TypeScript in web development. Maybe that's because there's just a bunch more code out there it can train with. But when you try to ask it to do 3D stuff and 3D games, it seems like it struggles a little bit. And I just think that there's just less demo repos out there. I think there's less examples that it can be trained to kind of give you code examples from. But in terms of what I've seen it done, I have done vibe coding on web applications. And if you can learn how to give it the right amount of context, it's going to generate a decent amount of code that works, right? I would say 90 to 80% of the time it works pretty well. If you provided the context. If you just go in blind and make a new chat window and tell it to achieve something, usually it's not going to work that great. So some ways that you can make it better is there's a cursor file. If you're using cursor, you typically want to give it rules. So like you should have an MD file that explains the architecture of your system. How do you have your API set up? Like what layer of your code base is responsible for talking to your database? What layer is responsible for your components? Like where does stuff live in your code base? The less you give AI, the more bad code it's going to generate. So I would think you should leverage the rules in Cursor or whatever AI system that you're using. Leverage giving as much context as possible. I think rules are automatically injected when you ask prompts. But I mean, you can do the @ symbol and you can actually click and drag like folders into here. You can click and drag files. You can reference various other things. And the more you give it, the better it typically performs. And also the more guardrails you put up, like let's say you only want it to modify this page, then I would probably make sure that your chat prompt only has this as context and nothing else. Otherwise, AI might start touching other files. So in order to give AI the context that makes it work the best, you have to understand your code base. For example, if you opened up this really small, project, and then you started asking AI to start implementing features, it's probably not going to perform as well for you than it would for me, because I know the different files I need to modify to achieve the best results. For example, if I wanted to modify my course content page that has like this video player, well, then I'd probably reference the layout that does that. Okay, I already know off the bat what file is responsible for this, and I can just ask it to modify this file. And that helps guide AI and give you a lot better results. Let me hide my face real quick. So here's an example prompt I would do if I want to add a new feature to this code base that basically added a button here and it did something. Maybe it inserted some data in the backend. So I'd say modify this page to show a YOLO button so that when a user clicks it, it'll create a new record in my YOLO table. Please create a YOLO table in schema. So I'm going to pass it the schema file. I'm also passing the relevant file that should add the button. Remember to use server functions in data access layer in use case to achieve it. Let's just try this out. I'm going to let it generate the code real quick, and we're going to kind of analyze the code and what it's doing and see if it's on the right path. One thing I would recommend doing is read through it. As it's coming through, like just scan through it. There's been so many times where like the first code example that pops up is in a file that it should never have touched, and it's modifying code in a way I would never have done. And when it starts doing that, honestly, I'll just click stop here and I'll just say, you are doing the wrong thing, and I'll kind of correct it along the way. Now, if you have to do all this extra hand holding to get AI to be useful, like why would I still use it? Because honestly, having to type all this by hand or tab completing it is still going to be slower than just letting AI generate hundreds, if not thousands of lines of code in a single prompt. And that's the main selling point, is that now we don't have to worry about being very efficient at our IDEs and editing code and typing. You could be a terrible typist, but you could still build some amazing applications. So we're not limited by our physical capabilities of typing on a keyboard anymore. We are limited by our abilities to describe and communicate what our needs are to the software AI, which again, this is a skill that's going to translate to your job, right? If you can become good at communicating your needs to not only your coworkers and your managers, or maybe even your wife or your spouse, like being good at communicating and really describing what you want is something that you're going to learn the more you use AI. And I think you're going to shoot yourself in the foot if you're not trying now to understand how you need to talk to the LLM, because I found that there's a very particular way that you need to talk to the LLMs to make it more efficient. And I just don't think people actually understand how to prompt very well. So we got a new schema that was generated. We got a YOLO table, okay, and then set up relations. So again, I'll kind of skim through the code. Like it made a new table. You should know how your ORM works. You should know how your table should be generated, what columns should be, like what are these serial values versus like strings and timestamps. These are things that you as an engineer need to understand. Okay, right here, this actually put the DB YOLO file in the wrong place. So at this point, you might want to ask yourself, is my cursor rules, are they set up wrong? Am I not explaining enough in these rules of where my data access layer needs to be? because right now it just put this in a complete wrong directory. This DB directory is not for my actual like methods. So at this point, I'd probably switch this to data access, and there we go. I fixed that issue. But what I'm trying to show you is that the AI is going to get stuff wrong, but it's your responsibility to go and remember, okay, I need to tweak my rules and tweak my context so this will not happen again in the code base that I'm looking at. If we look at this file, I would say that this put this in the wrong location, and then also the layout. This is not the file I wanted it to change. So at this point, you didn't prompt correctly. I'm going to reject everything because I just don't think I prompted it very well. And I'm going to try to start fresh. Okay. We instead are going to give it the specific file that I want. And then I'm going to give it my data access layer and my use cases so that it knows what folders I'm talking about. Okay. So let's try prompting this one more time. I want you to add a YOLO button to this index page at the top near the other edit admin buttons. Okay. Again, I'm being specific. I want it to add it here. I want it to be to the left of the edit segment. So I should probably be very specific. I'm going to say at the top to the left of the edit segment button. I know my head's hiding this. Let me change this. When a user clicks the button, invoke a server function, define it in the same layout file. So I'll just do this, which should call a use case to create a YOLO entry inside the database. That use case should invoke a data access method. Also update schema to provide a new YOLO table. Now, honestly, I'd probably use voice to text to get this working, but let's just try this one more time. So let's see how much better it gets when I gave it a little bit more context about where I wanted my stuff to live, how I wanted it to create it, right? I'm getting a little technical here. I'm telling it where to put the server function. I want it to put it inside this file. Okay, so now let's look through this. So we have a YOLO table that got created. It looks like it's pretty good. We have a YOLO data access method that creates it. This looks fine. It does have a little database error, so I'm not sure what's going on there. We'll have to like fix TypeScript there. We have a use case. Okay, so it created a use case function in the correct location. It used the proper suffix on my files. If we look at this, we now have a button here that looks like it's creating a YOLO function, which is calling my use case. So all this code looks perfectly fine. This code looks like it did a good job. And if I click it, it might crash because I don't actually have like my schema set up. But at least the alert is popping up for us, okay? Okay, so this worked a lot better, and I think the reason is because I prompted it a lot better with a lot more context. Again, this all boils down to the question of, could I have done this faster myself? And honestly, I would probably still say no. I still think that modifying these 4 files, putting all the imports and making sure that the code is in the right place and trying to scroll through the code and figure out the right place to put these things, and then double checking that I didn't maybe forget something or I did something wrong. And if I were to mistype something, that could add another step of me having to debug my code base because I typed in the wrong character somewhere. Now I broke my code base. I would say that AI, for the most part, if it does it correct, then you will save a lot more time. And the goal is to make it generate correct output at a higher percentage most of the time. Now, I will say, leave a comment if there's certain strategies that you have found when doing prompting to make it be more accurate. Like what do you do? Do you just use cursor rule files? Do you just provide it a bunch of context? Or do you just think that the benefits that we're getting from this just truly isn't as good as people think it is? So again, like let's look at this application and let's try to break down like where I used AI to generate stuff. The layout of this, I used AI to generate. Most of the stuff you're seeing here, I used AI to generate. Again, could I have done it myself? Absolutely. Could I have gone and found a third-party React component library that does this type of layout for me? Sure. Could I have done something where when I go to mobile, like it still creates a mobile navigation menu that's the exact same? Probably. But would doing it myself have saved me time? Probably not. I think AI has made this a lot faster. Like even all these components that I added in, Here's another thing. I asked AI to add this little hover effect. This is something I've seen done on other websites. Is this something I could have done myself? Probably, but I would probably still go to Stack Overflow and I'd go and look up examples, or I go on GitHub and find examples, and then I copy and paste those examples into my code base, and then I tweak them myself. So at the end of the day, am I truly doing it myself without assistance from, the internet? No, I'd probably still be looking for example things. Now, some people are good enough where they understand all the nuances of CSS and animations and opacity and radials and stuff like that, that they could have easily done this themselves. But when it takes me 10 seconds to prompt AI and 5 seconds to wait for it to add this hover style on cards, you really have to acknowledge the fact that you're going to move faster just using AI in certain situations. Now, I've been rambling for a while, and I'm going to give my opinions on it from an engineer who's been doing this for a while. My ultimate strategy right now is I typically prompt AI first, then I review the code. The prompts I give, I will make them as specific as possible to the knowledge that I have of my code base so that I get good results. And then I review the code and accept it. And then I'll reprompt it to a certain amount of times. If I'm prompting this thing 5 or 6 times and it keeps giving me bad results, to me, that's a signal that you're just not prompting it correctly, or you've encountered something that the AI just cannot figure out. The LLM just cannot solve it. And it might be more beneficial for you to jump into the files yourself and start doing tab completions or start understanding so you can get more context. But even like I said, I prompted AI maybe, 10 or 15 times, maybe even 20 times to get this little 3D thing working. And it still is probably a significantly less amount of time than if I were to try to do this myself and learn the 3D spaces again and learn the correct animations to rotate the camera and stuff. A lot of work probably could go into this. Not necessarily hard work, it's just stuff that I have to go back and relearn. And those are the strategies that I've been taking. But I do want to reiterate that when people say AI generates slop, I mean, this code, it's pretty sloppy, right? So you still have to come back with a fine-tooth comb and tell it to refactor and put things and get rid of magic numbers and make it better. I think you can just keep on adding a lot of bad code to your code base. If you don't have someone with experience of maintaining large code bases and making them maintainable, coming back and asking AI to fix things in a certain way. So my ultimate opinion is yes, you should be using AI. You should be learning how to work with it. You should be leveraging it when you think it's going to make you move faster. But at the same time, take some time to understand what it's doing in the code that it's generating. It's just going to make you a better engineer in the long run. And I don't think we're at the point yet that AI is going to take our jobs. I think right now it's a tool that can expedite your progress. And the people who know how to correctly prompt and use AI to get results done, I think are just going to be put above others who don't. And maybe that's ultimately going to take jobs, right? Maybe that's ultimately going to cut jobs away because now you have one person who's able to ship multiple apps and functionality at the same time compared to other people trying to do it manually. They're going to fall behind. If you're watching my content and you trust my advice, again, I would say, especially if you're in the web development space, you should probably use AI to help you generate some of this stuff. Again, that's why I use Cursor in all my videos. If I didn't think AI was this useful, I would not have 2 different Cursor subscriptions. I have a subscription for my personal laptop. I have a subscription for work. That's how useful I feel Cursor has made me. And maybe that's a subjective feeling. It's hard to quantitatively measure how much faster AI is making us. Like some people say that it makes you 1,000 times faster or 100 times faster, which in some scenarios, yes, I have spent days. I remember being on a project, we had 8 developers all trying to solve the same bug. And we spent 2 weeks together looking through the code base, trying to figure out what was causing this bug. And it boiled down to a single Boolean that we had this flip from false to true somewhere in our code base. Okay. Now, could AI have helped us find that bug faster? Potentially. And so there's scenarios like that I don't think we measure, where it takes a developer like a couple of days or hours to debug something. And if AI can just throw you that bone and help you solve it faster, these are the things we're not measuring. And I'll say I have seen this multiple times using AI, where I'm trying to do something myself, the classical way of programming. I run into a bug, I cannot figure it out, and I'll sit there for 10 or 20 minutes just trying to figure it out. And then I remember, I have Cursor. Let me just go ahead and have Cursor try to figure it out for me. It does it in 10 seconds. Then I'm like, okay, I should have actually leveraged Cursor first to help me get through this instead of wasting 20 minutes, because those are 20 minutes I'll never get back. Okay. And I know for a fact the bug I just solved is something dumb. It's some stupid typing error, a misspelling of something, me using some type of API incorrectly. And whether or not I solve the bug myself or I let AI do it for me, like I'm going to read through the code and understand so I don't do it again in the future, hopefully. Anyway, I know I've been rambling a while on this video, and leave a comment if you feel like I just ramble for too long. But that's about it. Have a good day. Happy coding.